He saved an Apache woman from a snake bite, but her sisters said he must prove himself worthy to marry her. The sun was rising slowly over the wide, open plains. Its warm light painted the hills and valleys with golden colors. Birds were singing in the trees, and the soft rustle of the wind through the grass gave the land a peaceful feeling. A young man named Daniel was walking along a narrow dirt path, carrying a small bag with some supplies. Daniel lived in a village near the edge of the wilderness. He was strong, brave, and kind, and people often spoke of his courage and helpful nature. Today, he was exploring the land beyond the village, curious about the forests and streams that lay beyond the hills. Daniel loved nature. He loved the smell of fresh grass, the sound of flowing water, and the way sunlight danced on the leaves. He often wandered alone, learning about the plants, animals, and streams. He knew how to find water in dry places, how to catch fish, and how to make small shelters if he ever needed to stay overnight. But what Daniel loved the most was helping people. From a young age, he had learned that bravery was not only about fighting danger, but also about helping others when they were in trouble. On this particular morning, Daniel was following a small stream. The water was clear and cold, and he enjoyed the sound of it flowing over the stones. He walked carefully along the bank, looking for signs of fish or small animals. Suddenly, he heard a sharp cry. It was a sound filled with fear and pain, a sound that made him stop immediately. Daniel turned his head and saw a young woman lying on the ground near the bushes. Her face was pale and she was trembling. Next to her, a snake was coiled, its fangs sunk deep into her leg. Without thinking twice, Daniel ran toward her. He had seen snakes before and knew that a bite from this type of snake could be very dangerous. The woman's eyes were wide with fear, and she tried to pull away from the snake, but it was too late. Daniel grabbed a sturdy stick and carefully lifted the snake off her leg. The snake hissed angrily and slithered away into the bushes. Daniel's heart was pounding, but he stayed calm. He gently helped the woman sit up and examine the bite. "Don't worry," he said softly. "I will help you." The woman tried to speak but could only whisper in pain. Daniel noticed that her leg was swelling quickly, and he knew that time was very important. He reached into his bag and pulled out some clean cloth and water. He tied a cloth just above the bite to slow the spread of venom. Then he cleaned the wound as best as he could. Daniel had learned about these things from an old healer in his village, and he knew the basic remedies that could help someone survive a snake bite until proper care was available. "Stay calm," Daniel said again. "I will take you somewhere safe." With great care, he lifted the woman into his arms. She was light enough for him to carry, but her trembling made it difficult. Step by step, he walked toward the village, moving slowly but steadily. He could feel her fear and pain, and it made him even more determined to help her. The sun was climbing higher in the sky, and the heat was beginning to rise, but Daniel did not stop. His only thought was to save her life. As they moved, the woman began to speak in a quiet voice. She thanked him repeatedly, her words full of fear and relief. Daniel smiled gently and told her to save her strength. He did not need thanks. He only wanted to make sure she survived. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing where some Apache families had set up their homes. Daniel carefully laid the woman down near a group of tents. Soon, other women and children came running, alarmed by the cries of the young woman. One of the older women approached quickly. Her face was serious, but there was a hint of relief in her eyes. She recognized the danger the young woman had faced and saw the courage of Daniel in helping her. "Thank you," she said in a firm but kind voice. "You have done a brave thing." The woman Daniel had saved leaned against him weakly, her hand brushing his arm. She tried to smile, though the pain in her leg made it difficult. "You saved me," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." Daniel shook his head. "No need for thanks," he said. "You are safe now. That is enough for me." However, not all the women looked immediately happy. Behind the older woman were three younger women, her sisters. They watched Daniel carefully, their eyes sharp and full of suspicion. They had seen many outsiders and knew that not everyone who acted bravely had pure intentions. While they admired his courage, they also believed that saving a life alone was not enough to earn respect or trust. According to their traditions, anyone who wished to be close to their family, especially if he wanted to marry one of them, had to show that he was worthy in many ways. The sisters approached Daniel slowly, their expressions calm but serious. "You have saved her life," one of them said. "That is good, but saving a life does not mean you are ready to be part of our family. Our customs are important. If you wish to be close to her, if you wish to marry her one day, you must prove yourself." Daniel listened carefully. He did not feel anger or fear. Instead, he felt respect. He had heard about the Apache customs before, but now he realized that these traditions were alive and important. He nodded. "I understand," he said sincerely. "Tell me what I must do." The sisters looked at each other, then back at him. They explained that in their culture, a man must demonstrate courage, wisdom, skill, and respect for the community. Each quality would be tested through challenges, and only after passing these trials could a man be considered worthy of marrying one of their family. The sisters' eyes were serious, but there was also a spark of hope. They wanted to see if this young man truly had the heart and mind to be worthy. Daniel listened carefully. He felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had never faced these kinds of trials before, but he knew that if he wanted to be worthy of her and her family, he would do whatever was necessary. "I accept," he said firmly. "I will do whatever it takes." The woman he had saved watched him with wide eyes. She had already admired his bravery in saving her life, but now she saw something more. A man who was willing to respect her people and prove himself through hard work and honesty. She smiled weakly and whispered, "Thank you for caring about more than just me." The sisters nodded slightly, recognizing his sincerity. They told him that the first trial would be a test of courage. He would need to venture into the mountains to retrieve a sacred item that had been placed there by their ancestors. The journey would not be easy. There would be wild animals, steep cliffs, and difficult paths. But if he could complete it, it would show that he had the courage needed to be part of their family. Daniel felt a mix of determination and nervousness. He had always faced challenges in the wilderness, but this one was different. It was not only about survival, it was about proving his worthiness, his respect for their traditions, and his desire to be honorable. He knew the journey would be hard, but he also knew that the woman's life and the respect of her family were worth every step. As the sun climbed higher, Daniel prepared for the journey. He packed what little he needed: water, food, and tools to help him on the path. The woman's sisters gave him advice and directions, telling him how to avoid dangerous paths and what signs to watch for. Daniel listened carefully, memorizing every detail. The young woman smiled at him, and Daniel felt a warmth in his heart, a feeling of connection, respect, and responsibility. Before he left, the older woman spoke to him one last time. "Remember," she said, "courage alone is not enough. You must also show respect, wisdom, and kindness. That is what we value most." Daniel nodded. "I understand," he said, his voice steady. "I will do my best." And so, with the warm sunlight on his back and the sound of the wind through the trees, Daniel began the first step of his journey. He was not just walking into the mountains. He was walking into a path that would test his courage, his skill, and his heart. He knew the road would be difficult, but he also knew that true bravery was not just about facing danger. It was about facing it with honor, respect, and care for others. As he disappeared into the trees, the young woman watched him with hope in her eyes. The sisters watched closely, their expressions calm but watchful. And in that moment, the story of bravery, love, and respect began to unfold, one careful step at a time. Daniel walked carefully along the narrow trail that led into the mountains. The sun was warm on his back, and the wind carried the smell of pine and fresh earth. He could hear birds singing high in the trees, but there was also the quiet, steady rhythm of the wilderness, rocks shifting under his feet, leaves rustling, and the distant sound of a flowing river. This journey was unlike anything he had ever attempted before. He was no longer just exploring for curiosity. He was stepping into a challenge that would test not only his courage, but also his patience, intelligence, and respect for the world around him. The mountains were beautiful but dangerous. Steep cliffs rose on either side of the path, and narrow ledges forced him to move carefully. Small animals scurried into the bushes at his approach, and Daniel reminded himself to be gentle and respectful, careful not to disturb the balance of nature. He carried only what he needed in his small bag: water, some dried food, and a few tools that could help him in emergencies. He thought about the young woman he had saved. She was depending on him, not just to complete this journey, but to prove that he could be trusted, that he could honor her family's traditions. As he climbed higher, the trail became more difficult. Loose rocks threatened to tumble under his feet, and he had to test each step carefully. The first challenge was already clear. This was a test of courage. If he was afraid, he could make mistakes. But Daniel focused on his breathing, taking slow, steady steps. He told himself that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite it. Every careful step he took reminded him of why he had accepted this journey. After a few hours of climbing, he reached a narrow ridge that overlooked a deep valley. The view was breathtaking. The mountains stretched for miles, covered with thick forests and dotted with sparkling streams. The sun glinted off the rocks, creating shadows that danced across the slopes. Daniel paused for a moment, letting the beauty of the landscape fill him with energy. But there was no time to linger. According to the sisters' instructions, the sacred item he needed to retrieve was hidden in a cave further up the mountain, beyond dangerous cliffs and rocky paths. Daniel moved cautiously, carefully following the clues the sisters had given him. He watched for signs of wildlife and listened for the faint sounds of flowing water, which would indicate the river near the cave. The climb became steeper, and he had to use both hands and feet to pull himself up certain rocky sections. At one point, he almost slipped on loose stones, but he caught himself just in time. His heart was pounding, not with fear, but with focus. Every action required careful thought. Every step could be dangerous if he rushed. As the sun moved higher in the sky, Daniel spotted a narrow path leading toward the mouth of a small cave. He knew this had to be the place where the sacred item was kept, but approaching it was not simple. A large rock blocked part of the path, and below it was a steep drop. Daniel paused and studied the area. He realized that to reach the cave safely, he would need to find another route around the rock, using a combination of climbing skill and careful judgment. He found a series of smaller ledges that allowed him to move around the obstacle slowly. Each movement required patience and attention, and he reminded himself that courage alone would not be enough. Wisdom and careful thinking were equally important. Finally, after careful navigation, Daniel reached the entrance of the cave. The opening was small and shadowy, and inside he could see the glimmer of something placed carefully on a stone. The sacred item, the one he had been sent to retrieve, was a small, beautifully carved symbol of the Apache people. Its meaning was deep and important, representing courage, wisdom, and respect for the community. Daniel approached it with reverence. He knew that this was not just a test of physical bravery, it was also a test of character. He knelt and gently lifted the item, careful not to disturb the surroundings. Just as he held it in his hands, he heard a faint rustle behind him. He turned quickly and saw a small mountain goat standing nearby, its eyes curious but cautious. Daniel smiled softly. Even in this moment of success, he reminded himself to remain calm and respectful of the animals around him. He carefully placed the sacred item back in his bag, making sure it was secure. This was not only a test for him, but also a moment to show respect for the land and all living things within it. The journey back down the mountain was just as challenging as the climb up. Gravity worked against him on the steep slopes, and he had to use ropes and his careful judgment to avoid slipping. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the forested slopes. Daniel felt tired, but he knew that giving up was not an option. Every step reminded him of the young woman who depended on him and of the promise he had made to her family. His determination grew stronger with each careful movement. Along the way, he encountered a small stream blocking the path. The water was cold and fast-flowing. He could have found another route, but that would have taken much longer. Instead, he tested the stones in the water, carefully choosing ones that were stable enough to step on. He balanced carefully, moving slowly, and managed to cross without falling. This small success reminded him that patience and careful observation were just as important as courage. As night began to fall, Daniel finally reached a safe clearing near the village. He was exhausted, his legs sore and his hands scratched from the rocky paths, but he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced his first challenge and succeeded. More than that, he had done so with respect for the land, for the sacred item, and for the community he was hoping to become a part of. When he returned, the young woman and her sisters were waiting. They had been watching carefully, though from a distance, and now they could see the determination and care in his movements. The sisters looked at him with a mix of surprise and respect. Daniel approached them humbly, holding the sacred item in his hands. "I have brought it back safely," he said quietly. "I did my best." The sisters examined the item, then looked at Daniel closely. They could see the scratches on his hands, the dirt on his clothes, and the tiredness in his face. These were signs of effort, courage, and determination. One of the sisters spoke first. "You have shown courage," she said. "You have faced the mountain and returned safely. That is the first step." Daniel nodded. He felt a mix of relief and pride. He knew this was only the beginning, but passing the first trial gave him confidence. The young woman he had saved smiled weakly at him, her eyes shining with admiration. "You were brave," she said softly. "I can see that you truly care." The older sister added, "Courage is important, but it is only the first step. You will face other trials, each testing a different part of your character. Wisdom, skill, patience, and respect for others will all be tested. Only then will we know if you are truly worthy." Daniel listened carefully. He understood that each trial would be a lesson, teaching him more about himself, the land, and the people he hoped to be close to. He felt ready, even though he knew that the next challenges would be difficult. The first trial had shown him that with focus, respect, and determination, he could face any obstacle. As the night fell and the stars began to shine in the sky, Daniel rested near the village. He thought about the journey ahead. He thought about the young woman, her sisters, and the responsibilities he was taking on. He felt a sense of purpose that went beyond himself. This journey was not just about proving his bravery. It was about learning, respecting, and becoming a person who could honor the traditions of a community and the life of someone he cared about deeply. The night was quiet, but Daniel could hear the soft whispers of the wind and the gentle calls of night animals. He felt a connection to everything around him: the mountains, the trees, the river, and the people he hoped to serve and respect. He knew that tomorrow would bring the next trial, and he would need all his courage, intelligence, and patience to face it. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace, knowing he had completed the first step on a journey that would change his life forever. As he closed his eyes to rest, Daniel promised himself one thing: he would face every challenge with honesty, bravery, and respect. And no matter how difficult the path became, he would never forget why he had started this journey: to protect, to honor, and to prove that he was worthy not just of her life, but of her trust, her family, and the love they could one day share. The morning sun was just beginning to rise when Daniel awoke in the small clearing near the Apache village. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. He stretched his sore muscles, remembering the climb up the mountain the day before. His hands were scratched and his legs still ached, but he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had passed the first trial, showing courage and determination, and that gave him confidence for the next challenges. The young woman he had saved was already awake. She sat quietly near the fire, her eyes following Daniel as he moved. She smiled softly when she saw him, and Daniel returned the gesture. There was a quiet understanding between them, a bond formed through trust, respect, and the life he had saved. Her sisters approached him next, their expressions calm but serious. They were here to explain the second trial, which would be very different from the first. "You have shown courage," one of the sisters said. "That is important, but courage alone is not enough. The next trial will test your wisdom, your intelligence, and your ability to help others. You will need to show that you can think carefully, act wisely, and serve the community." Daniel nodded. He felt ready. He knew that this trial would be more challenging in a different way. It would require patience, careful thinking, and problem-solving, not just physical strength. The sisters led him to a small field near the village where the community grew crops and kept animals. They explained the challenge. A group of children had been trying to reach a nearby stream to fetch water, but the path was dangerous, and some of the irrigation channels were broken. Daniel's task was to find a safe way to bring water to the children and help fix the broken channels, ensuring the community could continue its daily work safely. Daniel listened carefully. He observed the fields, the channels, and the path to the stream. He saw that some of the wooden supports were weak and that water was spilling, wasting precious resources. He could also see where the children had been struggling, stepping on slippery stones and risking injury. Daniel understood that this trial was not about showing physical strength, but about showing that he could think, plan, and act with care for others. He rolled up his sleeves and began. First, he carefully inspected the path to the stream. He found loose stones and dangerous spots where someone could fall. Using some of the materials he had brought, he reinforced the path with sturdy branches and tied them securely. Then, he examined the irrigation channels. Some were clogged with dirt, while others had cracks that caused water to leak. Daniel worked patiently, clearing the dirt and repairing the cracks with clay and stones he found nearby. His hands were messy, and the sun grew hotter, but he did not complain. Every small improvement he made helped the community and kept the children safe. As he worked, some of the villagers came to watch. At first, they were cautious, curious to see what the young man was doing. But soon, they noticed his care and skill. He was not rushing or acting recklessly. He was thinking carefully, observing each problem, and finding the best solution. The children watched him with wide eyes, amazed at how someone could take the time to make sure everything was safe and fair. Daniel smiled at them, encouraging them to help under his guidance. Together, they lifted small stones, cleared dirt, and helped secure the channels. By midday, Daniel had transformed the small area. The path to the stream was safe, and the irrigation channels worked properly, allowing water to flow smoothly to the fields. The children could fetch water without fear, and the crops were better protected from waste and damage. The sisters watched closely, nodding in approval. This was exactly the kind of wisdom and practical skill they were looking for. Daniel had not only solved the problem, but had also involved the community, showing that he could work with others and respect their needs. After a short rest, the sisters explained the next part of the trial, a test of skill. This challenge would require speed, accuracy, and endurance. They led him to a nearby forest where some small game had been placed for practice hunting. Daniel was told that he needed to demonstrate his ability to track and capture the animals, but without harming them unnecessarily. The task was to show that he could provide for others responsibly and with care, using skill rather than brute force. Daniel took a deep breath. Hunting was something he had experience with, but this challenge was different. It required focus, patience, and respect for life. He moved quietly through the forest, listening to the sounds around him. The rustling of leaves, the snapping of twigs, and the soft calls of birds all told him where the animals were. He approached slowly, careful not to startle them, and used his hands and tools to guide the animals into traps that would allow him to capture them safely. It took time, and Daniel had to adjust his strategies several times. Some of the animals were clever and avoided his traps, testing his patience. But Daniel remained calm, observing their behavior and learning from each attempt. He discovered which methods worked best and which did not. By the afternoon, he had successfully captured the animals safely, showing the sisters that he had both skill and respect for life. The trial was not about speed or strength alone, but about intelligence, patience, and ethical action. The young woman watched him from the edge of the forest, impressed by his determination and care. She saw that Daniel was not acting for himself, but was thinking about the community and the people around him. His actions reflected kindness, respect, and responsibility, qualities she deeply valued. The sisters nodded in approval, recognizing that the young man had successfully completed this part of the trials. But the day was not yet over. The sisters told Daniel that there was one final test for this part of the journey, a challenge of patience and careful observation. He was to sit quietly by a small pond and watch the movements of the birds and animals around it. The task was to record what he noticed, demonstrating attention to detail, understanding of nature, and the ability to learn from observation. Daniel found a comfortable spot near the edge of the pond. The water was clear, reflecting the trees and sky above. He sat quietly, not moving, and watched as birds landed on the branches, fish swam near the surface, and small animals came to drink. At first it seemed simple, but soon he realized that patience was the true challenge. The animals were easily frightened, and any sudden movement would send them away. Daniel had to stay completely still, breathing slowly and observing everything with care. Hours passed, and Daniel remained focused. He noted the patterns of the birds, how the fish reacted to movements, and how the animals approached the water. He also thought about how these observations could help the community, predicting weather changes, understanding animal behavior, and using this knowledge to protect crops and livestock. His notes and insights were detailed, showing that he could learn from the world around him and apply that knowledge to help others. As the sun began to set, Daniel finally stood up, stretching his stiff muscles. He felt satisfied, knowing he had completed the second set of trials with patience, intelligence, and skill. The sisters approached him, their faces calm but full of respect. "You have shown wisdom," one of them said. "You have worked carefully, thought deeply, and acted responsibly. That is the second step. You are learning what it means to serve and protect, not only with courage but with understanding." Daniel smiled, feeling proud but humble. He knew that this journey was teaching him more than he had imagined. It was not just about passing trials. It was about becoming a person who could live with honor, respect, and care for others. The young woman stepped forward, offering him a small piece of bread and water. "You are learning quickly," she said softly. "I can see that your heart is true." The older sister spoke last. "The next trial will test your character in a different way," she said. "It will test your honesty, your kindness, and your ability to make choices that protect others, even when it is difficult. That will be the most important test of all, for it shows who you truly are inside." Daniel listened carefully. He understood that every trial built upon the previous one. Courage alone was not enough. Wisdom and skill were important, but character, the way he treated others, the way he made decisions, would be the final measure of his worthiness. He felt a quiet determination in his heart. He would face every challenge with honesty, respect, and care, knowing that each step brought him closer to earning the trust of the woman he admired and the family he hoped to join. As night fell, Daniel prepared for rest, reflecting on the lessons of the day. He had learned that true strength was not only in the body but also in the mind and the heart. Courage could save a life, but wisdom and skill could protect many. He knew that the final trial would be the hardest yet, testing not just what he could do, but who he truly was. The stars shone brightly above, and the night was calm. Daniel sat quietly by the fire, thinking about the young woman, her sisters, and the community that had welcomed him cautiously but respectfully. He felt a deep sense of connection, not only to the people around him but also to the land and the lessons it taught. Tomorrow, he would face the next trial, the trial that would test his heart, his choices, and his character. And so, with determination and hope, Daniel closed his eyes and rested, ready to face whatever the next day would bring, knowing that each step on this journey was shaping him into the person he needed to be: brave, wise, skilled, and honorable. The sun rose slowly over the village, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Daniel awoke, feeling the cool morning air on his face. He stretched his tired muscles, remembering the trials of the previous days. He had faced the first challenge with courage, climbed the dangerous mountains, and returned safely with the sacred item. He had passed the second trial, showing wisdom, patience, and skill in helping the community and learning from nature. Now the sisters told him it was time for the final trial, the trial of character. Daniel knew this would be different. Courage, skill, and intelligence could all be measured through action, but character was tested in choices, in the way a person treated others, especially when no one was watching. It was the hardest trial of all because it required honesty, selflessness, and true integrity. The young woman he had saved approached him quietly. She held a small bundle of herbs in her hands, a sign of respect and care from her family. She did not speak, but her eyes conveyed encouragement. Daniel nodded to her, feeling a deep sense of responsibility. He knew that this trial would decide everything. The sisters explained the challenge. "There is a situation in the village that requires careful judgment," one of them said. "A problem has arisen involving the animals, the fields, and the safety of the children. You must make a decision that protects others, even if it is difficult or requires sacrifice. This trial will show us who you truly are inside." Daniel listened carefully, analyzing the situation in his mind. A young child had wandered near the edge of a cliff while chasing a small animal. The child had slipped but managed to grab a tree branch, holding on just enough to avoid falling. Nearby, a goat had broken free from its enclosure and was running toward the cliff, threatening the child. At the same time, water from the irrigation channel had begun to overflow, endangering the crops in the fields. Daniel saw that he could not solve all these problems at once. He would have to prioritize and make careful choices. He took a deep breath and moved quickly. First, he approached the child near the cliff. He spoke softly, calming the frightened little one. "Hold still," he said gently. "I will help you." He carefully moved closer, ensuring his own balance on the unstable ground. With steady hands, he reached the child, holding onto the branch while pulling the child to safety. The child cried with relief, clinging to him, and Daniel smiled reassuringly. This first action required both courage and calm judgment, and it showed that he valued the safety of others above his own fear. Next, Daniel turned his attention to the runaway goat. It had nearly reached the cliff's edge, bleeding loudly. He knew he could not chase it recklessly, or he might push it further into danger. Instead, he used his voice and gentle movements to guide it back toward the enclosure. Step by step he approached, speaking softly, waving his arms calmly to steer the animal. The goat resisted at first, but Daniel was patient. He remembered the lessons he had learned from observing nature during the second trial, the importance of patience, understanding, and respect. Finally, the goat returned safely to its pen. Daniel wiped the sweat from his brow and turned to the irrigation channels. The water had overflowed due to the earlier blockage, threatening the crops. The villagers depended on these fields for food, and Daniel knew that acting quickly could prevent serious damage. Using the tools he had carried with him, he cleared the blockage and reinforced the channels. Water flowed smoothly once again, saving the crops and ensuring the community's livelihood was protected. Each action Daniel took required careful thinking, planning, and responsibility. It was not enough to act quickly. Every choice had consequences, and he needed to think about the long-term effects of each decision. The sisters watched quietly from a distance, observing not just what Daniel did, but how he did it. He did not act recklessly or selfishly. He did not take shortcuts. He considered the safety and well-being of every person, child, and animal around him. He worked with care and patience, showing a depth of character that impressed even the elders. As Daniel completed these actions, a sudden sound reached his ears, a cry from the forest. A small deer had become trapped in a tangle of branches, struggling to free itself. Many people might have ignored it, thinking it was not their responsibility, but Daniel could not. He ran carefully to the deer, untangling the branches with gentle hands, calming the frightened animal. When the deer finally leapt free and ran safely into the trees, Daniel felt a quiet joy. This act of kindness, done without expectation of reward, was exactly what the sisters wanted to see. After the immediate dangers were resolved, Daniel spent the rest of the day helping the villagers in smaller ways. He repaired fences, gathered firewood, and offered guidance to those who were struggling with chores. He spoke to everyone politely, listening to their concerns and acting to help when he could. It was not flashy work, and no one asked him to do it, but Daniel understood that true character was shown through consistent, thoughtful actions, even when they went unnoticed. The young woman watched him throughout the day. She saw that he was not acting to impress her or her sisters. He was acting because it was right. She noticed the patience in his movements, the kindness in his words, and the careful attention he gave to every detail. Her admiration for him grew with each passing hour. She whispered to her sisters, "He is not just brave or clever, he is good and he cares about others." By the evening, Daniel had completed all the tasks. He returned to the sisters, tired but calm, carrying only the satisfaction of knowing he had done what was right. The sisters approached him, their expressions now softening with approval. "You have faced the final trial," one said. "You have shown courage, wisdom, skill, and most importantly, true character. You have protected others, acted with honesty, and shown kindness without expectation of reward. This is what it means to be worthy." Daniel bowed his head respectfully. "I did what I felt was right," he said quietly. "I only hope it was enough." The sisters smiled. "It is more than enough," another said. "You have proven yourself not only to us but to yourself. Your heart, your actions, and your mind are all in the right place. You are ready for what comes next." The young woman stepped forward, placing her hand gently on Daniel's arm. "I knew you were brave when you saved my life," she said softly. "But now I see who you truly are. You are kind, thoughtful, and honorable. That is why I trust you, and that is why I am glad you are here." Daniel felt a warmth in his heart. The trials had been difficult, testing every part of him, his courage, his intelligence, his skill, and now his character. But he realized that the true reward was not only the approval of the sisters, but also the knowledge that he had grown as a person. He had learned patience, humility, and the importance of caring for others. He had learned that being worthy was about more than completing tasks. It was about living honorably and acting with respect in every moment. The sun set over the village, casting long shadows across the fields. The air was calm, and the first stars began to appear in the sky. Daniel and the young woman walked together to the small clearing where they had first met. They spoke quietly, sharing stories and laughter, enjoying the calm of the evening. Her sisters watched nearby, satisfied and proud of the young man who had proven himself through trials and actions. That night, as Daniel rested by the fire, he thought about the journey he had undertaken. He had faced mountains, wild animals, and difficult tasks. He had learned from the land, the animals, and the people around him. He had discovered the importance of courage, wisdom, skill, and character, and he had grown in ways he had never imagined. But more than anything, he understood the meaning of respect for life, for tradition, and for the trust others placed in him. The young woman and her sisters had been cautious at first, observing him carefully. Now, they saw not only a brave man but a person of true integrity. The bonds of trust and respect had been strengthened through every trial, and Daniel felt a sense of belonging that he had never experienced before. He knew that the final part of the journey, acceptance and union, was close, and he felt ready for it. As he closed his eyes that night, Daniel promised himself that he would continue to act with honor, kindness, and respect, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The trials had tested him in every way possible, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. He knew that true worthiness was not about completing tasks or showing bravery. It was about living with a good heart and making choices that protected and uplifted others. And in the quiet night, with the stars shining above and the soft sounds of the village around him, Daniel felt a deep sense of peace. He had faced the hardest trial yet, and he had succeeded. The journey was not over, but he had proven in his heart and in the eyes of the sisters and the young woman that he was worthy. The morning sun bathed the village in warm, golden light. Daniel awoke with a calm feeling in his heart. He had faced the first 4 trials, courage, wisdom, skill, and character, and had passed them all. Now he knew was the final step, acceptance. Today, the sisters would decide if he was worthy to join the family and one day marry the young woman whose life he had saved. The air was filled with anticipation, and even the birds seemed to sing louder as if celebrating this important day. Daniel prepared himself quietly, checking his belongings and reflecting on all he had learned. He remembered every moment, the climb up the mountains, the careful repair of the irrigation channels, the patience he had shown with animals, and the decisions he had made to protect the village and its people. Each trial had taught him something new about courage, responsibility, and kindness. But now, he knew that none of that mattered without respect, humility, and honor. He was determined to show the sisters that he had learned these lessons deeply, not just for the trials, but for life itself. The young woman he had saved approached him. She was dressed simply, yet she carried herself with grace and confidence. Her eyes met his and she smiled softly. "You have come far," she said, "not just in distance but in heart. I am proud of what you have done." Daniel smiled in return, feeling a warmth in his chest. He had admired her from the moment he first saw her, but now he admired her even more for her strength, her kindness, and her wisdom. The sisters appeared, their expressions calm but serious. Villagers had gathered nearby, curious to see the final ceremony. Daniel stepped forward, bowing respectfully. The eldest sister spoke first. "Daniel," she said, "you have faced every trial we set before you. You have shown courage in danger, wisdom in problem-solving, skill in providing for others, and most importantly, true character. You have acted with honesty, kindness, and humility in all things." Daniel felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect. "I have tried my best," he said quietly. "I have learned from your teachings and from the land itself. I hope I have done enough." The sister smiled gently. "Enough? You have done more than enough. You have proven yourself worthy not just through deeds, but through the way you think, care, and act. Today, you will be recognized by the family and the community." A soft melody began to play from a small group of musicians in the village. Drums and flutes filled the air with gentle, celebratory sounds. Villagers watched silently, their eyes reflecting admiration and respect. The young woman stepped forward, standing beside Daniel. The sisters approached them both, placing their hands on their shoulders. It was a sign of blessing, of acknowledgement that Daniel had completed the journey with honor. The eldest sister spoke again. "Daniel, from the moment you saved her life, you showed courage. But you have shown more than that. You have shown respect for our people, patience with our land, and care for every living being. You have proven yourself worthy of joining this family." The young woman looked at Daniel, her eyes shining with emotion. She reached for his hand and held it gently. "I have seen your heart," she said softly. "I have seen your courage, your kindness, and your respect. You are the man I trust, the man I know will stand with me and protect our family. Today, I am glad that you are here, and I am proud to call you my friend and, in time, my partner." Daniel felt a deep sense of joy and humility. He had not acted to win approval or praise. He had acted because it was right. But now, to have the acknowledgement of the sisters, the young woman, and the community filled him with warmth and satisfaction. He realized that the journey had changed him profoundly. He was no longer the same man who had walked into the wilderness days ago. He had grown in courage, wisdom, skill, and character, and he had earned the trust and respect of people he deeply admired. The villagers began to clap softly, their hands rising in quiet applause. Children peeked from behind fences, smiling and whispering excitedly. Even the animals seemed calm and peaceful, as if sensing the harmony in the air. Daniel and the young woman stood together, holding hands, surrounded by the people whose respect he had earned and whose lives he had touched through his actions. The sisters guided them to a small ceremonial area where they placed flowers and herbs on a wooden platform. It was a symbol of life, respect, and blessing. The eldest sister spoke words of wisdom, praising Daniel's courage, his intelligence, and the goodness of his heart. She reminded everyone that true worthiness was not just in heroic acts, but in consistent kindness, careful judgment, and respect for others and the land. Daniel and the young woman exchanged quiet smiles. They did not need grand words to express their feelings. Their eyes spoke volumes. They had shared a journey of trust, courage, and growth, and that bond was now stronger than ever. The young woman's sisters stepped forward, placing their hands on Daniel's shoulders once more. "You have earned our trust," one of them said. "You have shown that you are worthy not just in deeds but in spirit." Daniel bowed deeply, acknowledging their words with respect. "I am honored," he said. "I will continue to act with honor, kindness, and respect every day of my life." The celebration continued as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Villagers brought food and water, sharing a simple but joyful meal. Stories were told of Daniel's bravery, wisdom, and character, and children listened with wide eyes, inspired by his journey. Daniel felt a deep sense of belonging. He had not only proven himself through trials, but had also become part of a community that valued respect, courage, and kindness. As the day progressed, the elders invited Daniel and the young woman to walk through the village together. They visited the fields he had helped repair, the paths he had made safer, and the animals he had protected. Each place reminded them both of the trials he had faced, the lessons he had learned, and the bonds he had formed. The young woman laughed softly as she recounted small moments of the journey, and Daniel smiled, realizing that these memories would remain with them forever. In the evening, as the sun began to set, Daniel and the young woman stood on a small hill overlooking the village. The sky was painted in brilliant colors, orange, pink, and gold blending together. The village below was calm, the fields and homes bathed in soft light. Daniel felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. He had faced challenges that tested every part of him, learned lessons that would guide him for life, and earned the respect and trust of people he deeply cared for. The young woman turned to him, her eyes shining. "You have proven yourself," she said softly. "Not just through courage, but through the way you think, act, and care. I am proud of you." Daniel took her hands in his, feeling a warmth and connection he had never experienced before. "I am grateful for your trust and guidance," he said. "And I promise to continue to live with honor, courage, and respect." The sisters approached once more, their expressions soft and approving. "You have passed every trial," the eldest sister said. "You are now part of our family. Your journey has shown that true worthiness comes from the heart, from actions guided by kindness, courage, and respect. Today, we celebrate not just your achievements, but the man you have become." The village joined in the celebration, clapping and cheering. Children ran around, laughing and playing, while elders smiled with pride. Daniel and the young woman stood together at the center of the celebration, their hands joined, feeling the joy of connection, respect, and love. As night fell, the village glowed with the light of small fires and lanterns. The air was filled with music, laughter, and the soft whispers of the wind through the trees. Daniel and the young woman sat quietly together, reflecting on the journey they had shared. Every trial, every challenge had brought them closer and had shown them the true meaning of trust, respect, and partnership. Daniel realized that his journey was not just about proving himself to the sisters or earning the right to marry. It had been about becoming a better person, learning the value of courage tempered with wisdom, skill guided by patience, and actions rooted in integrity. He understood that the trials had been designed not to test strength alone, but to shape him into someone worthy of respect, love, and trust. The young woman leaned against him, smiling softly. "I am glad you were here," she said. "You have shown that love and respect are more than words, they are actions." Daniel smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "And I have learned that the greatest reward is not praise or recognition, but knowing that you have acted rightly, with courage, wisdom, and care for others." The stars shone brightly overhead, and the village rested peacefully under their light. Daniel and the young woman sat together, watching the night sky and feeling the calm of accomplishment, trust, and connection. The journey had been long and challenging, but it had also been full of lessons, growth, and the creation of bonds that would last a lifetime. In that quiet night, Daniel understood that true bravery was not just about facing danger. It was about living honorably, respecting others, and making choices guided by kindness and integrity. He had passed every trial, earned the trust of the sisters, and most importantly, had proven himself worthy in heart, mind, and spirit. The journey was complete, and a new chapter began, one filled with respect, love, and partnership. Daniel and the young woman stood together, ready to face the future side by side, knowing that they had built their bond on courage, wisdom, skill, and true character.